Hey everyone, hopefully you guys had a good holiday period and you were able to get all of the mantles you were hoping to get your hands on. Today I wanted to have a very quick discussion regarding Monster Hunter Wilds' massive changes that will become as essentially players begin to quickly realize that this game is gonna change the franchise and put it on its head. We're going to be looking at a game that is looking to revamp the way we actually traditionally play Monster Hunter, and I don't think there's been a lot said, or at the very least a lot of discussion regarding of just the amount of changes that just a very quick little teaser trailer that they gave us showcase going forward. So today I wanted to have a very quick discussion regarding just how much the franchise is looking to change based on just a very snippet of information that we've been able to get our hands on. Of course, the short trailer that we also got to see. And lastly, kind of go over some of the latest news information that we've gotten based on some of the actual Japanese translated articles that we have been able to see. I do want to make a couple of separate videos as well and tackle those later on, because there's a lot of like smaller quotes as well that I think that are valuable on their own. But I think the bigger picture idea here is that the franchise is looking to revamp itself probably more than we have ever seen before, and I think that's certainly worth talking about. And I think to lay down the foundation of what I'm trying to say here, I think we should probably begin looking at the franchise, for the Monster Hunter franchise in general, from the PSP days all the way to the 3DS. A lot of the changes that simply took place within those generations to, well, apart from, of course, the first game, the second, third, and fourth generations all took place within those consoles. PSP, PlayStation 3, Wii U, and of course the 3DS. But most of those games were designed for the handheld experience, and the franchise just simply didn't change all that much. They added things around it, but they didn't necessarily move the ball forward, and we saw the massive shift in the experience when it came to Monster Hunter World. Rise provided a different experience, but of course, ultimately it was designed for handhelds. What I'm thinking that they're trying to do with Wilds here is that basically they are trying to turn it into a strategically more open world, live service, PC game centric experience that I think players are going to have a little bit of a difficult time adjusting to based on just some of the major changes. Now, I don't want to get into the whole, hey, look at the pixel counting here and look at the visuals there. I actually want to make a separate video talking about what Digital Foundry had to say regarding the reveal trailer, because I found a lot of the tech talk that they actually had in there. I believe it was like a weekly video that they do. I found that to be way more interesting than anything I could have probably provided. So I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below, and I probably will kind of circle back to that at a later date, because visually the game is looking to do something very interesting. But I think gameplay wise is where the massive changes are going to hit, because we're used to, most players I would assume traditionally are used to picking a quest, starting a quest, hunting one very specific monster, getting the rewards, going back out, restocking their supplies, their potions, whatever, crafting new armors, going back into the hunt, you know, designated areas, target of approach, all of that. All of those things are pretty much the bread and butter of the Monster Hunter experience. And when we're looking at an open world game with seismic changes like traversal, open world, movability, basically the expansiveness of the map, the trajectory of like how do you get from one place to another, how do you grab a quest from one end of the map and traverse all the way to the other one. If you start to thinking about those things, then the game completely will have to change the way you actually approach it, because ultimately you're no longer warping from one place to another or going from one short map to another. You're always in that big open map. You're always ready to take on or go left, south, right. If you want to think about it like a Breath of the Wild, for example, you can just kind of like approach the map in any way you want. And I'm very interested to see just what it is that they're hoping to do with this like big massive map that you're going to be able to explore. Are you going to be able to like teleport yourself to a closer location because maybe you've been there before? There's some pillar points that you can actually move to, warp yourself towards, so you can actually get closer to the hunt that it is that you want to engage with the monster that it is that you wish to tackle. Or do you always have to constantly travel from one point to another, slowly and methodically making your way through the entirety open world? Also, what monsters are you going to be approaching as you make your way there? You know, everything will have to be tiered to some experience. We know that Master Rank is going to be the highest difficulty, at the very least, you know, maybe at the starting of the game. So Where do they hide those monsters? Do you have to unlock them, or are they sectioned off in certain areas? Do you have to be a certain level to just be able to see those monsters? All of these questions are changing ultimately the way that you experience the game. And it doesn't necessarily end there. You have to think about, for example, playing with others. Usually in Monster Hunter games, you team up with players that maybe you already know, you've teamed up with before. They join your group, and then you set out on a hunt. Again, you get popped up in a specific area, you make your way through the smaller map, you go fight the monster, end of the story. Well, usually in MMORPGs or live service type games with big open worlds, what you end up having is a lot of like sectioned off little areas. Like Diablo did this recently as well, which I found it to be very interesting, where you're just essentially, you get closer to one specific area and you're quickly prompted that there's an event taking place. So maybe there's a pink Rathian right around the corner on this cliff. The next thing you know, there's 3 other players already fighting it. You just get queued up to basically just go into their hunt, and instantly you're just ready to fight them. There was no screen telling you like you want to start this quest, you want to take on this monster. What I'm trying to say here ultimately is the experience from the minute to minute moment is going to ultimately change. That doesn't necessarily mean combat is going to change. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the way you drink your potions, the way you set up before a hunt, the way you're still gathering materials, none of those things have to necessarily change. But the way that you connect to a hunt, the way you travel from one place to another, the way you're ultimately are going to want to be able to play with friends, all of those things are going to change. If you also take the idea of like what current MMORPGs are doing in this like specter of like live service games, you also have big massive cities where players are just kind of walking around and you see everyone just hanging out. Is Monster Hunter turning into Final Fantasy 14? Is basically what I'm trying to ask here. This is something that we're going to have to expect to see, because ultimately once you have a live service game, everything around it changes. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to still try to give 2 full separate experience. The traditional Monster Hunter experience where you go to a quest board, you pick the quest that you want, you pick the monster that you want, then you get thrown into closer to the area where the monster is going to spawn. You get your little, flies or whatever. You follow them up, or the little owl tells you where the monster is. You make your way there. You find the other team members that you were queued up with, and instantly get to hunt it, which is the traditional experience. Or do you actually have to move from one place to another, far long distances, or like everything is just kind of like queued up events, right? Everything is just happening relatively closely. A couple of people are fighting in Diablos. You get a queue and a prompt. Hey, the walk is, a minute and a half away. You make your way there, and then the next thing you know, you're fighting the Black Diablos, which you didn't even know it was in that area, but it's now appearing in that specific spot. All of these things are going to change the experience, and I'm not trying to say any of these things are good or bad. I'm not even saying any of those things. I'm not even putting signifiers on it. What I am trying to say is that traditional Monster Hunter players are probably going to end up having a little bit of a tougher time adjusting to this experience. At the same time, this is also catering to a lot of casual players, a lot of players who are just willing to check out a game for a few hours, seeing if they're going to have a lot of fun, and then, maybe not playing the entire thing all together. Like ultimately, that is what Capcom is trying to, the audience that they're trying to get, which is understandable. But ultimately, also at the end of the day, you have the end game experience, the master rank status. You have all of these players who are used to having, 300, 400, 1,000 hours into their experience. Well, those players also need to have enough content to be able to kind of like have a good time with the game and be able to continue playing forward multiple years down the future. And regardless of the monster, tier list or whatever, like how good the monsters are, maybe all the new monsters that they introduce are amazing, and some of the best, Gen 6 ends up having the best monsters, and the combat ends up being fun, and they do end up adding a couple of new weapons. But if all the interconnected pieces and the parts of the game where the traversal isn't necessarily all that fun, or maybe it's sluggish, or maybe you don't have fast travel warping for whatever reason, ultimately those things end up taken away from the experience, and it doesn't necessarily feel like Monster Hunter anymore. And that is the point that I'm trying to make. This game doesn't look like traditional Monster Hunter. We haven't seen any actual true combat, so I want to withhold judgment there. But based on what we have seen, based on everything that I've been reading regarding some of these Ryoso Sugimoto quotes, it doesn't seem like they're trying to do a traditional Monster Hunter World 2 or something like that. They're trying to do something completely different that they haven't done before, and it's closer to an MMORPG than what has been Monster Hunter before. And I feel like at the very least, that's gonna that might end up having some sort of pushback by some part of the community, some players who may not necessarily be too happy. I also have to bring this up because I thought about this recently. It reminded me of a lot of my experience with like Final Fantasy XI, for example, where you had notorious monsters appearing in certain parts of the map. I believe it was like maybe like those super rare ones would appear maybe like once a week or something like that, and they only had like a 5-day, 3-day cooldown timer, so they wouldn't necessarily appear all the time. They would just appear every couple of days. Can you imagine a Monster Hunter game having, like, say, like Magna Malo only appears, you know, every other Tuesday, you know, on X amount of hours, and you can only hunt it in those specific terms because that's the way the game has been designed, is with that in mind. Those kind of things you would hope that they kind of go down by the wayside with the MMORPG experience, but it does make me wonder if, because they are still Japanese developers and, you know, they have done those things in the past, would you be able to see like limited time, really, really rare spawn type things happen where ultimately you just have to be at that location to be able to see those monsters appear in order for you to be able to get those quest rewards or like armor upgrade rewards and stuff like that, which would be really, really off-putting, but also really interesting in the idea of it. Ultimately, in practice, is not necessarily all that much fun if you're standing there for 2-3 days trying to get a spawn. But again, it's a live service, it's a live world, it's constantly moving, things are constantly happening, and not everything should be queued up to you and your own personal experience. So that is ultimately why I think there might be some growing pains when it comes to Monster Hunter Wilds massive changes in the franchise. I certainly want to talk about more about this going forward into the future. I just kind of want to get my opinions out there regarding just some of the things that I've been reading regarding the game, and people kind of hoping for it to just be Monster Hunter World 2, but it doesn't necessarily sound like that at all. Again, I will be talking about some of the developer quotes in the next few videos. I'm still, as you can probably hear, my voice is still not fully back. I'm still trying to recover, but I will try to get to those videos sooner rather than later, starting in 2024. If you're brand new to my channel, though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.